Friends, welcome to the latest session of our course, The Introduction to the Quran. Today we're coming to you from the Masjid An-Nur in South Bend, Indiana, or the Islamic Society of Michiana. It's a great honor to be here, and we're here as guests of the Imam Muhammad Sirajuddin. The topic of today's session is, in particular, the revelation of the Quran. And we're going to explore with Imam Muhammad questions of how Muslim tradition sees the process by which the Quran became a text, that is, how it came from God, from heaven to earth. So, welcome, Imam Muhammad.
Thank you. It's my pleasure
It's
to
an honor.
be part of it.
It's an honor to have you with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's my pleasure. So,
Why don't we enter right into this question of the revelation of the Quran? I thought we might begin simply by discussing generally, from your perspective, how Muslims see how the Quran, as I just mentioned, how it became a book that was in heaven to a book that's on earth. How would you present this question?
this is a good time. Today and tonight is considered the night in which Quran either entirely or just started to come down to our world through Angel Gabriel on the heart of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So it was more than 1400 years ago when Prophet Muhammad started going to the cave of Hira in the mountain of Jabal An-Nur, the mountain of light.
Like
and
we're in Masjid An-Nur, the mosque of light.
Yeah, that's true.
Yes.
So in Jabal An-Nur, in the cave of Hira, he was meditating and asking the questions that generally every serious human being asks in their life, that, what are we doing here? What is our destination? And what is the meaning of life? And why are we here in this world? So one day, when he was spending days and nights in Ghar Hira, cave Hira, so the angel Gabriel, archangel, appears to him and embraces him, hugs him, and squeezes him and asks him that read. And he says that I am not a reader. I don't know how to read.
Because by tradition he was illiterate, he wasn't able to read.
He wasn't able to read, and there is a wisdom in that, so that people cannot accuse him that he learned from this school or from this teacher. So God wanted him to be illiterate so that his heart is pure from the outside influences. So when Angel Gabriel asks him to read, he says, Ma ana biqari. I am not a reader. I don't know how to read. Then he embraces him again and asks him the same question, that read. And then he repeats the same answer. Then third time, Angel Gabriel, he squeezes him and asks him the same question, and then he repeats the same answer. Then Angel, the archangel, starts commanding him to read. اقرأ باسم ربك الذي خلق خلق الإنسان من علق اقرأ وربك الأكرم الذي علم بالقلم علم الإنسان ما لم يعلم. That these are the 5 first verses revealed in Ghar Hira, cave Hira, in the mountain of light, which says that read in the name of your Lord, who is most generous, who created things in this world, and who taught human being through the means of pen, and who taught him what he did not know.
And this today we find in chapter 96 in the Quran.
That's true. This is the beginning verses of chapter 96.
Which is interesting for us because already it gives us some insight to the question of the chronology of the Quran.
Mm-hmm.
Because here we have the first revelation is not chapter 1 or surah 1, it's surah 96, and we'll speak about that in a moment. I wanted to ask about sort of the differentiation between 2 sort of stages or steps in the revelation of the Quran. Because we have the Quran, in a sense, passing from God to the angel Gabriel, and then passing from the angel Gabriel to Muhammad, to the Prophet. So maybe if we focus on that first step a bit, I think the majority position is that the Quran is an internal book, is uncreated, though there were some debates maybe in Islamic tradition about this in the past.
That's true.
But could you speak a bit about that?
Different stages.
Well, I mean in particular the idea that the Quran is an internal book, and how did it go from God to the angel Gabriel according to tradition?
When Quran refers the book, it refers to the original book. There is also the books that were revealed previously to previous prophets, to Moses, to Jesus, to Prophet Abraham, as well as the final revelation, which came down in the form of Quran that we have today. So that book was revealed from the preserved tablet, from the seventh heaven to the lowest heaven at one time, and then from there that book started being sent down to Prophet Muhammad on the night of Al-Qadr,
which is
night of power, night of honor and decree.
And here in 2015, here in South Bend, where we're filming, is tonight. Yes. So that's
good time.
Good time. Let me ask in particular about this phrase you use. You spoke about the preserved tablet, and you mentioned that there were more than just the Quran. Was sort of in this heavenly book. Could you speak about this a bit more? So this means that the Quran has a special relationship, according to Islamic belief, with other books that were revealed before.
That's true. Quran is just a latest version of God's guidance and the divine speech that God has been sending to mankind through the same angel Gabriel and through the same media.
Angel Gabriel is my favorite angel, of course.
Yeah. That's why you named after.
And you mentioned this tradition that from the preserved tablet, sort of the first step of revelation on the night of Qadr, was that God sent down the Quran from the highest heaven to the lowest heaven. How should we imagine this? I mean, if you were to explain how Muslims understand this, should we think of the angel Gabriel physically, sort of really traveling through the heavens with a physical book? Or should we think of this in spiritual terms? How would you speak of this?
This is from Alamul Ghaib. This is the world of unseen. This is the celestial world. This cannot be comprehended, understood from the world that we live, from the things that we understand. But, it talks to us in our own language in this world, that he is taking from the seventh heaven Quran and then bringing down to the lowest heaven. It is for us to understand, but we cannot know completely, how it happened there. So this is completely from the world of unseen, from the ghaib. So that's why it is faith.
Thank you. Yeah. I was also then curious in pursuing a bit more an investigation into the second stage of revelation. So we spoke about how the Quran came from God to the angel Gabriel, but then there's also the question of how it came from the angel Gabriel to the Prophet Muhammad. Could you speak a bit about this?
Okay.
Did the angel Gabriel speak to him? Was it an audible voice according to Islamic tradition? Was it a sort of inspiration? How should we understand that?
There is a long, the authentic tradition in the book of Bukhari, in the book of traditions of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That tradition talks about the nature of revelation in the chapter of Revelation. It says that Aisha, the wife of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, peace and blessings of God be upon him, she narrates about the wahi, and she says that sometime it used to come like salsalatul jaras, like the buzzing of bees or ringing of a bell in that sound. And sometime Angel Gabriel, he would come in the form of a human being and bring that revelation. And some of the companions who would be around during that revelation, they would feel that Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings of God be upon him, is sweating, and his voice is changing, and he is breathing heavily during that time. So there are physical signs on his body, but again, it is from the ghaib, from the unseen world. So there are some physical elements, to understand.
It would almost be evident to his companions and sort of show that he was going through this experience.
Yeah,
of revelation.
that's true. That's true. And then, that tradition says that, that sound would, convey the verses of the Quran, and then he would memorize them, and and then right after the revelation, then he would call the people who would write the revelation and dictate them
to make sure they were preserved accurately.
Yeah.
There's a quotation here that I wanted to read to you and to see your reaction. This is from a Western scholar named Roge, who translated the Quran. And in his introduction, in speaking about the revelation of the Quran, he says, in the digital age, we're now in the digital age, in the digital age, we might liken it, that is this process of revelation, to the instant downloading of an e-book from a website to a computer's hard drive. What do you think about this metaphor? Is this a good metaphor?
This is good to, again, for us to understand in the language, in the terminology that we are very familiar in our time. But at the same time, these things are related to the divine. So the Quran is the divine speech, the Kalamullah. So all the elements doesn't have to match with this, the example, metaphor. Yeah.
Yes.
But there is an element in this, for us to make it easy to understand and to grasp the nature of the wahi.
Right. Another question that's interesting to me about this second stage of revelation, so about how the Quran came from the angel Gabriel to the Prophet Muhammad, is sort of the distinction between the Prophet's own inspired thoughts and the Quran itself. Because Islamic tradition tells us that not only did the Prophet receive Quran and proclaim the Quran as the word of God, but also everything he said was in sense inspired. Maybe you can correct me or explain this a bit, right?
In Surah An-Najm, it says that in huwa illa wahyun yuha, wama yantiqu anil hawa, that he does not speak from his hawa, from his desire. Whatever he speaks, it is from God. But not necessarily it means that God put words in his mouth through the revelation, as it is the case in revelation, in the wahi of the Quran. Quran is worded completely, from God, from the divine, through Angel Gabriel, on the heart of Prophet Muhammad.
And the other things he said, we would speak of them as sunnah maybe, or hadith.
Yeah.
But those two are somehow a mirror or a reflection of God's will, according to Islamic tradition.
Yeah.
But not the words, or in the Prophet's own words. Is this
exact words. Yeah. As it is in case of Quran. And then the question of authenticity, in Quran, it is more, preserved, and also it is considered the most authentic book because it was recorded, it was memorized, it was preserved through the hearts of human beings as well as through the form of writings.
So some people analyzing the Quran might notice that it tends to use, for example, figures of expression or turns of phrase or examples or metaphors that are very close to the time and place in which the Prophet lived. So when it speaks of amthal or parables, using something that would have been understandable, whether it's speaking about the desert or palm trees or the eye of a needle and a camel, something we know from the Gospels as well. But it seems to be very much connected to the time and place the Prophet lived. It's not using examples, let's say, that would be familiar in China or New Zealand or someplace far away. Does this mean we can speak of an element of sort of the Prophet's own involvement in the Quran, that he was expressing things in some ways, or he had his own mental participation in the text of the Quran? Or should we think of the Quran as closer to a dictation of the angel's words of the Prophet?
It is the dictation of the angels of the Prophet, and God knows what language people would understand better at that time. But those parables and examples, they are, since the Arabs of Makkah, they were the direct addressees of the Quran. So Quran uses those the parables and examples. But at the same time, even in our time, they are understandable and they are relevant for us too.
So they have this sort of timeless quality, as you see it.
Yeah. For example, the surah, chapter of Abasa, in which Prophet is, told to, pay attention to one of his companions, who happened to be blind and poor. So Prophet was told to pay more attention to him, because he is a sincere Muslim. So here we see that it is a very timely incident that was addressed in this chapter, but at the same time, there is a lesson for us too in that.
So I actually want to ask about this chapter in particular. I'll just read the English translation to the first opening verses, if that's okay.
Yeah.
This is from the translation of Talal-Itani, which we're using for this course.
Okay.
So the first verses of Surah Abasa, which is Quran number 80, in the academy or in the West, we're used to numbering.
Numbers, Usually, I was trained in the seminary in madrasa, so we don't use usually numbers, we use names.
Which is much more challenging because you memorize all the names and maybe the text of the Quran itself. So the first three verses tell us, or the first two verses, he frowned and turned away when the blind man approached him. And then we have the story about Ibn Maktoum, this very specific story which you already alluded to, who was a blind man, and the Prophet was speaking with one of the leaders of the Quraysh and sort of turned away. The question I wanted to ask is, this story is very specific, and the revelation, or these verses revealed to the Prophet, speak about a very specific circumstance. And yet Islamic tradition also tells us that the Quran is eternal. How do these two things go together?
In this specific the incident, there is a universal teachings that are given, which is like in our time, it is very relevant. That about racism, the issue of racism that we are facing here, that you should you should not undermine anybody who is not the same socio-economic status.
So in this case, it's about a blind person, but it could be applied also to race.
To our time too.
I have another quotation, this time from a medieval Muslim scholar named Nasafi, who's from the 12th century, which speaks generally about the revelation of the Quran. Thank you for being so patient with me. There's only a couple more, more thoughts. This is how Nasafi describes the revelation. I thought I'd read it to you and get your response or maybe your commentary on it. He says, God caused Gabriel to hear the Quran as sounds and letters, for he created sounds and letters and caused him to hear it by that sound and those letters. Gabriel memorized it, stored it in his mind, and then transmitted to the Prophet by bringing down a revelation and a message, which is not the same as bringing down a corporeal object and a form. He recited it to the Prophet memorized it, storing up in his mind, and then recited it to his companions, who memorized it and recited it to their followers. It seems pretty close to the way you describe the revelation.
Yeah, that's true.
Is there anything you'd comment about that or add to it?
No, I would agree with that. This is a very good description.
Great. Well, there's one further stage, which you've already alluded to in traditions about the revelation of the Quran, which is first the Quran comes, according to tradition, from God to the angel, then from the angel to the prophet. But we actually have a third stage, right, where it comes from the prophet to his followers, and those eventually who will compile the Quran. Because as you mentioned, the first revelation of the Quran is eventually not Surah 1 but Surah 96. And the last revelation, there's some different traditions, but maybe Surah 9, At-Tawbah.
Nasr.
Or in Nasr 110, but not 114, not the final surah. So we have these traditions then, but how should we see the way that the Quran took the shape it has now? How did the Prophet know, for example, he had one piece of Quran 96, the first 5 verses, but he didn't have the rest of it at the beginning. But eventually he got the rest of it, but in between he might have had some other revelations. So it's almost like pieces of a puzzle. He had a bit here, a bit here, a bit here. How would he know the correct order in which to put all of these pieces back together?
The order of the verses of the Quran, as well as order of the chapters of Quran, as they are, in our time, that is considered the tawqifi, means it is from God, it is from Angel Gabriel, and that he, dictated Prophet Muhammad to place such and such verse in such and such the chapter. So that's how Prophet Muhammad organized and put the verses of the Quran in different chapters, and whenever a verse or verses were revealed, he was told that put this verse before this verse, after this verse, in this chapter. So he was completely commanded by Angel Gabriel, and from that from God.
And tradition even tells us, I think, that maybe once a year, is that right? Angel would visit him?
Once a year angel would visit Prophet Muhammad during the month of Ramadan, and then he would recite to Angel Gabriel. So we know that the present order of the Quran, it is from the Prophet, it is from the revelation.
But there's a question which remains for me, which is there anything sort of that we as human observers, we can perceive as special about this order? You see what I mean? Does it matter that Surah Al-Baqarah, Quran chapter 2, comes before Surah Ali Imran, Quran chapter 3, and then An-Nisa comes afterwards, Al-Ma'idah? Does that matter? Why did God want it in this order? I guess is another way.
The best answer for that is he knows the complete wisdom of that, but many scholars have tried to find the wisdom behind the present order of the Quran, why those chapters that are placed in the beginning of the Quran, why they are placed, what is the wisdom behind it, and how they are related to the next chapters, and how the verses are related to each other. So this is another complete different topic in the Quran, nazm of the Quran. Some scholars and some commentators of the Quran, they focused more on that, some not, but every one agrees that there is a wisdom behind the present order of the Quran.
And even if we might not understand in detail that wisdom, it's something we could, a Muslim would simply trust in God.
Yeah, that's right.
Thank you. It's been an honor to have the opportunity to speak with you here at Masjid An-Nur, and in a special season. So Ramadan blessings, Ramadan Kareem.
Thank you.
And
it's my pleasure.
Thank you.